Today I'm making new drip rails for the GQ Patrol. Hi, I'm Dave and welcome back to 65 Fab. In some of my recent short videos you might have seen I've been cutting these off the car because frankly these old drip rails, there's not a lot left of them. So it's time to make new ones, and the trick is to try and build in this little profile. I don't know whether we can actually get that nicely in focus, but it basically has this little dip that, you know, you've got the sidewall and a little dip, and that's there so that if you have chrome trimmings, etc., that they click on. So we need to try and build that profile. So given it's quite difficult to see the profile on these little pieces, I've whipped up a little diagram, and this is what we're trying to achieve. So over the top here, we've got a little hem, and this is only about 4 millimeters, 3 to 4 millimeters, so it's quite small, bit of a challenge. And then we come down the side, that's about 10 millimeters, 10.5. Here's the little dip that I spoke about before, that is what the external trim clips onto. And then the distance here going across the car, so this is actually the drip rail itself. That changes depending on where we are on the car, and we'll see that later. And then we'll have a bit of a back plate that goes up, and that's where we'll spot weld it on. So the first step is to actually make that nice little hemmed edge. And to do that, I've actually already primed along here because we're going to fold that hem over and we want to protect it on the inside. So that's job number one. But before we do that, full disclosure, I did this one this morning. So this was my test version. It actually came up, to be honest, surprisingly well. I'd had a number of different ideas about how I was going to approach it and thought, give it a crack this morning, and it worked. So now we'll actually, I'll do it and film what we're doing. So importantly, while I'm making these new drip rails for the Patrol, for the most part, drip rails seem to be largely universal. So apart from perhaps some minor adjustments to some of the dimensions, what we do here in making these, you could pretty much use for any car. So step number one is really just to mark a little 4 millimeter line here, edge, that will be our mark for the handbrake to begin turning over the hemmed edge. What's important to note when we're trying to turn up such a tiny edge, just 4 millimeters, is that we're really on the edge of what the handbrake can easily do. So certainly if we put the long side in and try and turn up the small edge, with the brake here, it just won't do it. It's going to put a lot of stress on the teeth, etc., because it doesn't have the leverage. So we do it the other way, and we'll lock it down hard. But even then, it's not for the faint-hearted, and we need to make sure it's locked down, because otherwise the handbrake will really struggle to bend this up. But we're only trying to get it started. We're not trying to do the whole turn. We just want to get it going, and then we'll do the rest by hand. I managed to get it started, and this morning with the smaller piece on the back of the car, it certainly turned up a lot easier. But this is nearly 600 millimeters long, and to be honest, it's really struggling. It wants to pop out from the teeth, with the leverage trying to pull it sort of out backwards. So we've made a start. I'm going to now have a bit of a shot and see if I can just use that line and turn it over by hand. Well, that certainly took some effort, but we've got a nice straight edge here, a little hemmed edge. So to really tuck this in now and get it nice and flat, I could do it one of two ways. I could put it into the planishing hammer with just a couple of flat dies, and that would probably belt it down. But what I found this morning with the other piece was by doing it in the bead roller, I could get a lot of pressure on it and get this nice and flat. So that's what I'll do now. I've actually got the bead roller set up with a couple of 1/8, with a set of 1/8 stepping dies ready for the next step, which I'll explain soon. But in the intermediate, I can use just between the dies. I'm not stepping at all. I'm just using in between to squash down this hemmed edge. So that's what I'm going to do now. And that's given us a really nice, tight, hemmed edge all the way along. And I know that when I put it on the bench, that this is actually nice and a nice flat edge here. So on to the next stage, which again is using the bead roller. So now we need to form the little dip that goes down and then turn the edge back up. And I found that the best way I could think of to do it is to use the stepping die. So we're going to step down here on the die. You'll see, if you can see in closely there, it's a 1/8 step. So that's about 3 millimeters. We need about 2, but of course we've got 1 millimeter of steel. So I'm going to step it down, and that's going to just basically give us an edge that's a little bit too long, and then we'll put it back in the pan brake and turn it up. So you'll see as it comes through what it's actually doing. And then I've set up the fence here as close to the back of the bottom die as I can. In fact, it's basically touching. And the reason I've done that is that's as close as I can come. I obviously can't come in front of the dies. But what that actually is it means that the distance from the fence to the step is just on 12 millimeters. And the beauty of that is we're trying to turn our edge at about 10.5, which when we put it into the pan brake, we'll find that it actually turns up perfectly. I think you'll get the picture once it's done. So I'll put this through the bead roller. You'll see the step and you'll see what we do next. Well, that definitely took some effort, making sure that it stayed hard up against the fence, so we got a really nice straight line. But the most important thing is you can see that we've now got this nice step all the way along. Now that step is going to be about 12 to 12.5 millimeters, where what we want for the side is actually only 10.5. So what we're going to do now is the inside of the step, we're going to actually use the pan brake. We'll measure down about 10 millimeters. We'll put a line there with the pan brake, and then we'll use the pan brake to tilt the whole thing up. And we'll end up with, all going well, this little tiny dip here, turning around and becoming the side of the drip rail. Let's give it a go. I've now scribed a line at 9.5 millimeters down inside this edge, and I'm going to put that line underneath the jaws of the pan brake, and hopefully we'll be able to turn this up. Fingers crossed. I'm going to put the line pretty much all the way under so it largely disappears. That will help to give me reasonably shallow, again, fingers crossed, a reasonably shallow turn-ups. Let's see how this goes. I don't want to turn it up too far. That's probably close. I'll turn it a little bit more than 90, I think. Let's see how that looks. If we look now, you can see that we've got the little dip along the bottom. And that's pretty close to our original profile. If I get one of the originals, so this is one of the pieces we had. And if we look at that profile, and you can sort of get a gauge of the size of it, this one has come up pretty close. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so now all I need to do is, that's the hard bit done. All I need to do is to set the distances here on each end. We'll have to trim it off to fit it on the car. And it won't be dead straight because on one side it's at about 21.5 millimeters. On the other side, at the front of the car, it's 17 millimeters. So what I'll do is simply scribe a line, and again with the pan brake, just gently bring it up so that we start to get a feel for the shape of the car where we're going to connect it. And here is the basic piece. So you can see basically we've pretty much got the profiles matching. The sizing is about right on each end. So the next thing I need to do is actually fit it to the car, but it's getting a little bit late in the arvo and I don't want to bugger anything up. So I think I'll come back to this tomorrow and we'll keep working on it. But basically that's where we're at now. So I'll trim it up, we'll fit it to the car, and then we can weld it in. Well, that's the drip rail fitted. The next step is to simply weld it in. So I've punched some little holes here so that I can butt weld it onto the internal subframe that we made the other day. So I'll keep going. Let's do it. And here it is, fitted and finished. So I fit it with a little bit of primer. It's pretty straight on its body lines. So let's put the patch panel back in place and see what it looks like. And there we go. It's fitted. Wasn't that simple? In reality, what you didn't see, since I turned the camera off and said we'd fit the patch, I've spent 2 hours refitting the patch. And that's because once I'd made the new drip rails here, they actually sat higher and nicely in line compared to where the old rusty ones were sitting, which meant my patch was too big. So I've had to trim the roof again, trim the patch, but I'm actually pretty stoked with how it's come out. And that is basically the job done. So I hope that helps. I hope that's given you some ideas in regards to how you might be able to make a plane going overhead, be able to make your own drip rails. So until next time, thanks for watching.